Sorry about that. This is going to be in two parts. We're getting automated warnings of big coastal flooding and another storm coming, so that keeps intruding. But I'm assuming two parts. Hopefully I won't get another phone call and we can just finish this up. Anyway, so as I was saying, that what I'm doing is I'm using AI to go through the formula that you derive from this here in order to determine the various biochemical pathways that were being triggered and what their intent was. And then there's all of the timing aspects, how you do it in a particular order and all of this sort of thing, right? We could probably run that through AI as well. I haven't done that to suss this out. Now, bear in mind, I'm not doing the poisoning process mostly because I've been pre-poisoned by the cancer in that sense, right? And so I'd had a lot of damage, and I just was interested in the rebuild process, which itself is quite tedious because you have to have certain levels of preparation before you trigger certain pathways. Otherwise, it's a real problem. And I'm also dealing with impacts on my gut, so impacts on digestion. Thus, I've had to do, and then on top of all of that, then there's the issue of the formula, including herbs. You've got to suss out the names of all of these things very carefully because a lot of plants were identified by the same name and it changed over time. And you can get in some real problems because a lot of these things are, the plants themselves are poisonous unless they're treated in a particular way prior to ingestion, right? So there's a variance that way. And then, do we have those species of plants now that have the same level of qualities? Because a lot of the plants we're dealing with now do not, because they're growing up in the same kind of environment that we are, right? The chemtrails, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is, it's very complicated stuff. So I'm using AI to do some level of reconciliation of all of this, to locate the pathways that these formulas seem to imply. Once we've got the components of that formula locked down in a near realistic fashion relative to the multiplicity of names for the various components in the various languages changing over time. You see, it's not that easy, right? So I've got a lot of stuff here and then on top of that, okay, let me back up a bit. On top of that, when you actually start experimenting with taking these plants and so on in the way in which they're supposed to be formulated, a lot of the formulas I've thrown away because I understand using AI what pathways are intended to be invoked, and I can get to those pathways in a different manner that's not quite as tedious, right? Because we have a different approach to a lot of these things. So I've made my own adjustments to the formulas, and it's working, right? I'm satisfied with it. I'm proceeding. I expect to take maybe another 10 years in this process, because I'm not doing it the way that they were doing it, which was fairly rapid, by forcing your body to react to, the sudden die-off of, say, 60% of all the nerve cells, right? Some of this stuff was just excruciating to read about. I won't go into it. No need to tell you the horror stories I ran across in doing the research on this. But anyway, so I'm doing a death of deaths process. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of thinking. It takes a lot of smarts. It takes a lot of endurance and the willingness to endure internal pain as you take these things in order to produce specific effects. And so on. It's not like you're going to take detox, right? But this is like some of these things you take it and you might be up 10 or 12 times that night throwing up, and that's the designed process because of what you're going to be throwing up, right? It's not as goofy as it sounds on the surface, on the face of it. Mostly I don't do those kind of violent level things. I did initially in order to be sure that I was like removing those things that would be cancer proximate because I was so close to that. Now I know that the cancer was caused by most likely caused my cancer episodes by the injections of the Salk polio vaccine, which had simian virus 40 in it, which is a thing that is known to cause cancer and was known to cause the cancer bloom that I went through along with a lot of other males in my generation. Anyway, so this whole process was started when I was when I was doing my pure sleep research, right? Because I really desperately needed to sleep just in order to get my mind to start functioning again. So I thought, okay, and I spent 8 months doing my regular kind of routine, trying to work up to more than 4 hours of physical labor in a day from getting over the cancer. But I took 8 months to develop this. But in that process of developing this, I got seriously into a lot of these other issues as my mind started recovering from the anesthesia effects and the effects of the debilitation of the cancer. And so 8 or 9 months after the cancer surgery, so that would have placed it like early part of summer in 2019, I get my formula down. I'm starting to get sleep again, albeit interrupted because of the shortening of the bowel, etc. But at that point, I decided, okay, I'm going to pursue the rest of it and started going at it systematically. Found out that these people here I got some good research into it. This is pre-AI. And this is also when I was being harassed by butthead Corey Good with his lawsuit. So I had to divert and do lawsuit shit, which slowed me down even further. But nonetheless, I was able to pursue. I came up with this process, and it's relatively straightforward. You go and you find the formulas, and then you do a reconciliation on the plant names. A lot of them are real straightforward. They haven't changed. The plant identified in Sanskrit is basically the same plant identified in Hindi or Pali. The languages are, even though they may be separated by a couple of thousand years, are essentially holding the same information over time. And then you can see and then you get a listing of, a lot of these plants have been heavily researched, so that it's known by, it's already in many, many, many different databases as to what pathways these things may trigger, because a lot of pharmaceutical companies are desperately trying to actually get products that work and make money as a result of finding these products, right? So they need to know. And where do they go? They go to traditional medicine, because there are no other medicine sources than what we find within our common shared reality that we call planet Earth, right? It's not like there's ever been a successful synthetic medicine. So some of the most popular ones, like the diazepides, right? They sell more of those calming agents, lorazepam and all of those kind of things. They make a fortune on those, right? That formula is a bastardization of a chemical that's extracted from magnolia bark. And they take that chemical formula for the magnolia bark element, which is called honokiol, and they take that and they add nitrogen and hydrogen, and all of a sudden it's addictive, and they sell it to you. But the natural form is not addictive, and it does the same thing: neuroprotective, calming, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so I really got into a lot of this. I didn't want to. The cancer was life-changing because it killed me, and thereafter I was not interested in the same kind of things that I had been before, and I had a different view of reality, and so I started getting into a lot of this stuff, right? And now I come up to the point of the, getting into the ontology aspect of it all, and the space aliens. Okay, so everybody's clear here. I'm not going to tell you specifically what I'm taking, because it wouldn't do you guys any good. I'm taking it for a specific purpose at a specific time. A lot of it is injurious to other purposes at other times if inappropriately taken. And so, so this is much more medicinal than you might think of as like bodybuilding supplementation, right? Because I had to rebuild my body, and thereafter I could sit up here and, add some bulk, that kind of thing. And for that I'm doing, a whey shake, right? Only in my whey shake I add things to affect various different body systems at various different times, and it changes over time as to what I'm adding. So it's not like it's consistent. I'm not taking the same things now that I did when I started, and I presume I will not be taking these same things consistently, 6 months from now. There are a lot of things that are consistent. I take between 3 and 9 grams of vitamin C every day. My vitamin D every day with K2, vitamin E, etc. This is all in the idea of preparation. The idea for this whole process is detox through the poisons, and then you got to get rid of the poisons themselves, or at least have these other systems set up to block them when certain events happen. So detox through poisons, and then rebuild your body with new stem cells and so on. In order to do the rebuild, you've got to have the stuff in there to do have the body be able to activate to create those stem cells and send them where they need to go. And then the process for conversion. It's sort of like straight up supplementation, but the preparation, you have to know when to take it and basically when you don't need it anymore, right? When you've reached a certain level of saturation and so on. And so it can't be systematized to lay out for every person's body, although every person could do it with their own body if they were aware enough to, to pay attention to what's happening to them. A lot of people, as we know, wouldn't, but I would not want to put out a lot of these things because, as I say, they do include this element. It was necessary for my rebuild that I go through this process. This is one of the reasons, by the way, that I bitch at people like Carrie Cassidy with her saying we're all being turned into Borg because of silicon in our bodies. And she doesn't realize how incredibly necessary silicon is. Silica, okay? It's a necessary mineral on the planet. They use it in more than just photovoltaics. It's used in your body to mediate calcium. So if you've got lots of calcium but no silica in your body, you can't heal your bones, not effectively. It'll leave bone scars, a very telling situation. If you go to a grave site, which they did in Egypt, and they find bones that had been broken, and then when they healed up, they had scars and the bones themselves were like knitted poorly together, that's a sign of very low silica relative to the calcium in your diet, not calcium deprivation, as so many numbnuts academicians say, right? It's not calcium deprivation, it's the lack of the silica to moderate the uptake of the calcium. So we need silica in our body, and so Carrie Cassidy thinking silica and silicon is bad for our body is kind of silly. And in fact, silica, a necessary element, you're born with tons of it in your body that degrades over time because it's not that easily replaced in your diet. You can't go on out and just like chew sand and get silica, right? Or extract it out of, crunching on seashells, that sort of thing. It doesn't work that way, but you can easily take it as an ionic silica. It looks basically like water. It's like colloidal silica. And you replace that, and it's really an anti-aging, longevity kind of a thing. Because here's the deal. All your muscles are held together with this stuff called the fascia. It's 90% collagen. Collagen is very heavily dependent on silica because silica is the binding agent within collagen that holds the structure of all of your muscles together and allows you to move smoothly and so on. And if you get to a point where your body, when you're aging, and you have grit in the morning when you get up. I had a lot of this after the cancer because of the effects of the cancer and destabilizing my biochemistry, not only trashing my digestion, but also destabilizing the biochemistry to where calcium absorption and silica use was degraded, okay? And so, but if you get up and you have grit in the joints and it feels like there's literally sand in there, it's actually the lack of silica that's causing you to feel that way. I won't go into the specifics of how those receptors and stuff work, but if you investigate it, and you can try fixing this yourself by buying, I think it's like $6 or $7 for a thing of colloidal silica on silica water. You get that, you take a teaspoon in the morning and mix it in with fruit juice or just take it or whatever. And over probably about 3 to 4 weeks, you should feel that there's been a huge lessening of the grit, and getting up is easier, movement is easier, the joints are starting to heal and repair, right? Also, you may find that there's other ancillary effects in having better uptake of the calcium. But here's what you have to understand. Okay, so getting back to this kind of a process here, just like with the silica, if you're terribly, terribly deficient in silica, then you will have deficiencies relative to the calcium ions in your body. Ergo, when you start replacing the silica, all of a sudden the calcium gets like really agitated and shit happens relative to the calcium. And it may cause you to have a calcium drawdown. So you need to gulp more milk, right? And then that, because you've got the calcium there, raises the ratio you need of silica, so you have to have extra silica during that period of time when all this flushing is going on. That's what it's called, is something proximate flushing, okay? And what they're doing is the body is actually sort of rocking back and forth in ratios at a biochemical level in order to mediate them all and get all your needs met relative to the two substances or more that have a common goal and a common interconnectedness that can cause competition within the body itself when they get too depleted.